The silence came first, one by one. Cameras lowered and conversations died mid-sentence as the lone bear stumbled into the clearing, 70 yards from the observation platform, close enough for tourists to count the patches of missing fur on its massive frame. The creature swayed, fighting to stay upright, its eyes glazed with pain. Then time seemed to slow as the bear's legs buckled beneath its weight. The massive body hit the ground with a thud that seemed to echo across the valley. Gasps rippled through the crowd, followed by the frantic voices of rangers calling for everyone to move back. Everyone except 10-year-old Max Parker, who pressed forward against the railing, his eyes locked on the fallen giant, seeing something no one else noticed. It had been a perfect morning at Redwood Valley Wildlife Preserve until that moment. The preserve had opened its doors at sunrise, welcoming the day's first visitors with the promise of spotting some of North America's most magnificent creatures in their natural habitat. Among them was the Parker family, John and Lisa with their son Max, who had arrived early to secure a spot on the famous Northridge observation deck. They joined nearly 40 other tourists, armed with binoculars, cameras, and wide-eyed anticipation. The Northridge deck offered the best views of the valley basin, where animals often gathered near the small lake hidden among ancient trees. Tour guides pointed out eagles soaring overhead, while visitors marveled at a family of deer drinking cautiously at the water's edge. The atmosphere had been festive, filled with excited chatter and the occasional gasp of delight when someone spotted something extraordinary through their viewfinder. Max had been different from the start. While other children raced from one side of the deck to another, barely pausing long enough to truly observe anything, Max stood quietly beside his parents. His eyes scanned the landscape methodically, the way he had learned from countless nature documentaries. At 10 years old, he had already developed a reputation in his family as the animal expert. His bedroom shelves lined with wildlife books and his tablet filled with nature applications instead of games. The first indication something unusual was happening came when the deer suddenly scattered, disappearing into the dense forest with white tails flashing. A hushed anticipation fell over the crowd as everyone wondered what had spooked them. That was when they spotted it, a large brown bear emerging from the tree line, moving with a strange, unsteady gait that immediately caught the attention of the rangers. "That's odd," whispered one of the guides to his colleague. "Bears aren't typically active in this area during morning hours." Max overheard the comment and studied the animal more carefully. The bear was alone, unusual for this time of year. Its fur hung in uneven patches, and even from a distance, Max could see that something wasn't right. The magnificent creature, which should have moved with power and confidence, stumbled as if each step required enormous effort. Unlike the other bears Max had seen on nature shows, this one didn't seem aware of its surroundings. It didn't stop to sniff the air or scan for danger. Instead, it moved forward as if pulled by some invisible force, directly toward the observation deck where the tourists watched in growing concern. Then came the moment that would change everything. The bear collapsed. Its legs simply gave way as if whatever strength had been keeping it upright had suddenly vanished. The silence that followed was absolute, broken only by the sound of rangers springing into action, their radios crackling with urgent communications. For everyone on that deck, what started as an ordinary wildlife viewing experience had transformed into something entirely unexpected, a front-row seat to what appeared to be a tragedy unfolding in real time. No one could have predicted what would happen next, least of all that a young boy would see beyond the panic and chaos to something no one else recognized. The bear continued its unsteady approach toward the observation deck. Each labored step brought it closer, now just 50 yards away from the gathered tourists. The magnificent creature, which should have been the embodiment of wilderness strength, moved with an unsettling fragility. Its head hung low, swinging slightly from side to side, as if fighting to maintain focus on some invisible path forward. Park Ranger Thomas Martinez raised his binoculars for a closer look, his experienced eyes narrowing with concern. The bear's condition was worse than he had initially assessed. Its coat, which should have been thick and lustrous during this season, appeared patchy and dull. Foam gathered at the corners of its mouth, and its breathing came in visible, irregular heaves that lifted its massive rib cage in uneven patterns. "Something seriously wrong with that bear," Martinez murmured to his colleague, lowering his binoculars. "I've never seen one move like that before. The tourists sensed the ranger's concern, and the atmosphere on the deck shifted from excitement to unease. Parents instinctively pulled their children closer. Several visitors backed away from the railing, while others leaned forward, cameras still raised, torn between caution and the rare opportunity to document such an unusual wildlife encounter. Max remained transfixed, his hands gripping the wooden railing. Unlike the others, whose expressions reflected fear or morbid fascination, his young face showed something different entirely. Deep, genuine concern for the suffering animal. He noticed details others missed. The bear's half-closed eyes, the strange angle of its back right leg, the way its paws seemed to drag against the grass rather than lift with each step. The bear stopped briefly, 30 yards from the platform. It raised its massive head toward the structure, as if only now becoming aware of the humans watching its painful journey. For one breathtaking moment, its eyes seemed to lock with Max's, a connection that sent shivers down the boy's spine. The animal opened its mouth in what looked almost like an attempt to communicate. Then its front legs buckled. The collapse happened in slow motion. First, the bear's front quarters went down, its massive paws folding underneath its chest. It tried to remain partially upright, its back legs still supporting its weight for several heartbeats. Then those two gave way, and the enormous creature crashed fully to the ground, landing on its side with a force that seemed to shake the earth beneath it. A collective gasp rose from the observation deck. Someone screamed. A child began to cry. The Rangers immediately sprang into action, Martinez grabbing his radio while his partner began ushering tourists toward the back of the platform, away from a railing. All visitors stepped back immediately, Martinez commanded, his authoritative voice cutting through the chaos. This is an emergency situation. Cameras flashed frantically as people tried to capture the dramatic scene, even as they retreated. The bear lay completely still now, its massive chest heaving with shallow, irregular breaths. A thin stream of saliva ran from its mouth onto the grass, and its eyes remained half open, glazed with pain. The dramatic collapse transformed the once peaceful morning into a scene of confusion and distress. Tourists whispered urgently to one another, theories spreading rapidly through the crowd. Was the bear sick? Poisoned? Injured? Parents covered their children's eyes, shielding them from what many assumed would be the animal's final moments. In the midst of the growing panic, Max remained oddly calm, his eyes never leaving the fallen bear. While everyone else saw impending tragedy, he saw something else entirely, something that made his heart race with a different kind of urgency. Chaos erupted across the observation deck. Ranger Martinez barked orders into his radio, requesting immediate backup and veterinary support, while his partner, Ranger Wilson, created a human barrier between the tourists and the railing. The practiced calm of the Rangers barely masked their own concern. In all their years at Redwood Valley, nothing in their training had prepared them for a situation like this unfolding in full view of visitors. The crowd transformed from a collection of happy sightseers into a mass of confused, frightened spectators. Some rushed toward the exit path, pulling children along despite protests that they wanted to see what would happen to the bear. Others froze in place, hands covering mouths in shock. A few visitors continued taking photos, their camera shutters clicking rapidly in the tense atmosphere. One woman began to cry softly, turning away from the sight of the collapsed animal. Two teenage boys pushed forward, trying to get a better view until Ranger Wilson firmly directed them back. Whispers rippled through the group, theories spreading like wildfire. Perhaps the bear had been poisoned by illegal hunters. Maybe it suffered from some terrible disease that could spread to humans. A few speculated about rabies, causing nearby tourists to back even further away from the railing. The fear was palpable, hanging in the air alongside a growing sense of helplessness. Below, the bear remained motionless except for the shallow rise and fall of its massive chest. Its eyes stayed open but unfocused, staring at nothing. Foam continued to gather at the corners of its mouth, and occasional tremors ran through its powerful limbs. The Rangers exchanged grim looks. Without immediate intervention, the prognosis seemed clear. They had seen animals in distress before, but rarely one so severely compromised, and never in such a public setting. Ranger Martinez announced that emergency wildlife response was on the way, but his tone betrayed the truth everyone sensed. Help would likely arrive too late. The closest wildlife veterinarian was stationed 30 minutes away. The situation appeared hopeless. The tragic end to a magnificent creature playing out before dozens of unprepared witnesses. Amidst the commotion, Max Parker remained unnaturally still. Unlike the other children who cried or hid behind their parents, Max stood with his hand still gripping the wooden railing, his gaze never leaving the fallen bear. His parents tried to pull him back, his mother's hand gently tugging at his shoulder, but the boy seemed rooted in place. Something about his posture was different from the others. While everyone else radiated panic or morbid fascination, Max's body language suggested intense concentration. His eyes narrowed slightly as he studied the bear's condition with surprising clinical detachment for a child his age. His head tilted slightly, as if working through a complex problem. In the midst of collective helplessness, Max's expression slowly transformed from concern to something unexpected: recognition. While adults fumbled with what to do next and rangers waited for help that would arrive too late, the young boy's mind was making connections no one else had considered, seeing patterns where others saw only tragedy. Max Parker had always been different from other children his age. While his classmates collected sports cards and video games, Max filled his shelves with wildlife guides and animal encyclopedias. His bedroom walls displayed no superhero posters, but rather meticulously arranged photographs of endangered species. For his 10th birthday 3 months earlier, instead of asking for toys, he had begged his parents to sponsor a wildlife rehabilitation center. They had obliged, never quite understanding, but always supporting their unusually compassionate son. His fascination with animals had begun when he was just 4 years old. During a family trip to his grandfather's farm, Max had discovered an injured robin, its wing bent at an unnatural angle. While other children might have poked at it or simply walked away, Max had sat beside the bird for hours, eventually coaxing it to drink water from a bottle cap. His grandfather, a veterinarian before retirement, had shown him how to create a small splint for the wing. The day the bird finally flew away remained Max's most treasured memory. Since then, Max had absorbed everything he could about animal behavior and biology. He spent weekends volunteering at the local animal shelter despite being years younger than other helpers. His school projects invariably focused on wildlife conservation. Most importantly, he had developed an almost uncanny ability to read animal body language, to see beyond the obvious and understand what creatures couldn't express in words. Now, as everyone around him saw only a dying bear, Max's train had caught details others missed. The bear's symptoms didn't match what he had read about common wildlife diseases. There was no blood suggesting an injury, no visible wound from a hunter's bullet. Instead, Max noticed a slight blue tinge to the animal's tongue, the specific pattern of foam around his mouth, and the distinctive tremors running through its massive paws. His mind raced through pages of the wildlife medical guide his grandfather had given him, mentally comparing symptoms until a pattern emerged. The bear wasn't sick or wounded. It was poisoned, and not by hunters, but by something it had eaten. Max had read about bears consuming toxic berries when their usual food sources were scarce. The symptoms aligned perfectly with theobromine poisoning, the same compound that made chocolate lethal to dogs. The rangers continued their urgent radio conversations, waiting for distant help while tourists looked on in horrified fascination. No one was taking action that could save the bear. In that moment, Max understood with complete clarity that waiting meant certain death for the magnificent creature. His heart pounded against his ribs as a decision crystallized in his mind. The bear needed immediate intervention, a way to purge the toxins from its system. Adults would never listen to a child's diagnosis, especially one that contradicted their assumptions about injuries or disease. Even if they did believe him, protocol would demand they wait for the wildlife veterinarian. The bear didn't have that kind of time. Max's fingers released their grip on the wooden railing. His body tensed with resolve as his gaze swept the observation deck, quickly assessing what he would need. His parents were distracted, deep in conversation with another couple about the tragedy unfolding below. The rangers focused on crowd control and radio communications. No one noticed as Max slipped away from the railing, moving with quiet determination toward the small ranger station at the edge of the observation deck. The critical window for saving the bear was closing rapidly, and Max Parker had decided that waiting for adults to figure out was no longer an option. Max moved with surprising speed and purpose toward the ranger station. His small hands quickly found what he needed: the emergency medical kit mounted on the wall, clearly marked with a red cross. Without hesitation, he unlatched the box and rummaged through its contents until he found a small brown bottle. Activated charcoal solution, the very substance veterinarians use to treat poisoning in animals. With the bottle clutched tightly in his hand, Max turned toward the path that led down from the observation deck to the valley floor. The route was clearly marked staff only, with a chain stretched across its entrance, but Max ducked under it without a moment's pause. His sneakers hit the dirt path as he began running downhill toward the collapsed bear. The first shout came from Ranger Wilson, who spotted a small figure suddenly darting down the restricted path. His alarmed cry alerted the other adults, who turned to see young Max already halfway down the hill, medical supplies in hand, heading directly toward the massive predator. Lisa Parker screamed her son's name, her voice cracking with terror. John Parker lunged toward the path entrance, prepared to chase after his son. Ranger Martinez rushed to intercept the father, grabbing his arm while barking urgent orders into his radio for ground staff to intercept the boy. The observation deck erupted into fresh chaos. Tourists gasped and pointed as Max continued his determined descent, some filming the unfolding drama on their phones, while others turned away, unable to watch what they feared would be a tragedy. Despite the commotion behind him, Max never slowed or looked back. His mind focused entirely on the task ahead with a clarity that belied his young age. He had calculated the risk. The bear was too incapacitated to attack, but its condition was deteriorating by the second. The narrow window for intervention was closing rapidly. As he approached the fallen animal, Max slowed his pace, his movements becoming deliberate and cautious. The bear's size became truly apparent as he drew near. Its massive body dwarfed the boy's small frame. An adult male black bear could easily weigh over 400 pounds, and this one was larger than average. Its paw alone was nearly the size of Max's head. 20 feet from the observation deck, a ground ranger emerged from the tree line, running toward Max with outstretched arms. But the boy had already reached the bear. Instead of approaching its head with its powerful jaws, Max circled to the rear of the animal, staying clear of its paws even in their weakened state. He knelt beside the bear's massive hindquarters and, with trembling but determined hands, uncapped the charcoal solution. The tourists and rangers watched in disbelief as this small boy, showing knowledge far beyond his years, carefully positioned himself to administer emergency treatment to a wild predator that could, even in its weakened state, kill him with a single swipe. Max's face showed no fear, only intense concentration as he prepared to implement his desperate but informed plan to save the bear's life. Time seemed to stand still as Max knelt beside the massive bear. His small hands worked with surprising confidence, uncapping the activated charcoal solution and preparing to administer it. The ground ranger who had rushed toward him now stood frozen several yards away, torn between protocol demanding he remove the child from danger and the realization that any sudden movement might make the situation worse. From the observation deck, tourists and rangers alike held their breath. Parents covered their eyes or clutched each other's hands. Some turned away, unable to watch, while others remained transfixed by the scene unfolding before them. Camera phones captured every moment of the extraordinary intervention. Max gently placed one hand on the bear's hindquarter, feeling the coarse fur and the tremors still running through the powerful muscles beneath. The animal's breathing had grown more labored, each exhale producing a faint wheezing sound that confirmed Max's suspicions about poisoning. With steady hands belying his racing heart, he carefully tilted the bear's massive head just enough to create access to its mouth. Ranger Martinez had reached the bottom of the path now, approaching slowly with tranquilizer gun raised as a precaution. His expression shifted from alarm to bewilderment as he recognized what the boy was attempting. Against all protocol and professional judgment, he lowered his weapon slightly and called out to his colleagues to stand down but remain alert. Max poured the dark liquid into the bear's mouth with precision, ensuring it went down the throat rather than into the lungs. The charcoal solution was designed to bind to toxins in the digestive system, preventing further absorption. The bear's tongue reflexively moved against the foreign substance, but it was too weak to resist. For several agonizing moments after administering the solution, nothing happened. The bear remained motionless except for its labored breathing. Max stayed by its side, one hand resting gently on its flank, monitoring each breath. The crowd above was completely silent now, the usual sounds of the forest seeming unnaturally loud in contrast. Seconds stretched into a full minute. Some tourists began to shake their heads sadly, assuming the effort had been in vain. A few began to turn away, unable to bear witnessing the animal's final moments. The rangers exchanged grim looks, preparing to retrieve the boy from what they believed was a futile and dangerous position. Then the bear's massive body shuddered. A strange gurgling sound emerged from its throat. Max quickly backed away as the animal's reflexes finally responded to the treatment. The bear's body convulsed slightly as its digestive system began to purge the toxins exactly as Max had hoped it would. The bear's body heaved as its natural defenses, activated by the charcoal solution, began fighting against the toxins. Max backed away to a safer distance, his eyes never leaving the animal, as Ranger Martinez moved protectively to his side. The boy's face remained intensely focused, watching for the signs he hoped would come. After several tense moments, the first real indication of change appeared. The bear's breathing, which had been shallow and irregular, gradually deepened and found a steadier rhythm. The foam around its mouth began to subside as its body purged the poison. Most telling of all, the glazed look in its eyes began to clear, awareness slowly returning to replace the vacant stare of approaching death. A murmur rippled through the crowd on the observation deck. The atmosphere transformed as tourists who had been watching what they thought was a dying animal now witnessed something entirely different. Hope, fragile but unmistakable, spread through the onlookers. Parents who had shielded their children's eyes now encouraged them to watch the remarkable recovery beginning below. Ranger Wilson, still on the deck, lowered his binoculars in disbelief. The wildlife veterinarian was still 15 minutes away, according to the latest radio update. Yet the bear's condition was already improving. Whatever the boy had done was working against all expectations. The bear's massive paw twitched, then moved with purpose rather than the earlier involuntary tremors. Its head lifted slightly from the ground, the powerful neck muscles regaining their strength. Each small movement represented a victory against what had seemed inevitable just minutes before. Max remained perfectly still, his small chest rising and falling with rapid breaths of excitement. His eyes shone with unshed tears as he watched the magnificent creature begin its journey back from the brink. The rangers surrounding him exchanged looks of growing wonder and professional reassessment as the bear continued showing signs of improvement. The valley, which had earlier felt like a stage for tragedy, now hummed with a different energy. Birds returned to nearby trees, sensing the crisis had passed. The morning sunlight seemed brighter somehow, illuminating the scene of unexpected recovery. What had begun as a nature viewing experience had transformed into something far more profound, a powerful reminder of nature's resilience and the difference that one person, even a child, could make when they acted with knowledge and courage. The bear's recovery accelerated with startling speed. Its massive head lifted completely off the ground, powerful muscles tensing as awareness returned to its eyes. The crowd gasped collectively when the animal rolled onto its stomach, massive paws now positioned with purpose beneath its enormous frame. A park ranger reached for his tranquilizer gun, but Ranger Martinez raised his hand, signaling to wait. In a moment none would ever forget, the bear rose unsteadily to its feet. Its gaze found Max, who stood perfectly still under its scrutiny. For 3 heartbeats, boy and bear locked eyes in silent communication that transcended species. The bear gave a gentle huff of what almost seemed like acknowledgement before turning slowly toward the forest. With each step, its strength visibly returned until it disappeared with dignity into the sheltering trees. The observation deck erupted with emotion. Hardened businessmen wiped tears openly from their cheeks. A professional photographer dropped to her knees, overwhelmed by what she had witnessed. Parents embraced their children, using the moment to whisper life lessons about courage and compassion. A group of college students who had been joking earlier now stood in reverent silence, several wiping their eyes. Lisa Parker broke through the ranger's perimeter, running down the path to embrace her son. Her face streamed with tears of both relief and overwhelming pride. John Parker followed, his usual stoic expression replaced by naked emotion. When they reached Max, they enveloped him in a family embrace that brought fresh tears to the observers above. Ranger Martinez knelt beside the family, placing a hand on Max's shoulder with newfound respect. The wildlife veterinarian, arriving too late for the emergency, but just in time to witness the recovery, approached with professional amazement. After a brief examination of the area and consultation with Max, she confirmed his diagnosis of theobromine poisoning, likely from discarded human food containing chocolate. As the Parker family made their way back up the path, the crowd spontaneously formed an aisle of honor. One by one, tourists reached out to touch Max's shoulder or shake his small hand. An elderly man removed his hat in respect. A teacher asked if she could share his story with her students. By afternoon, the story had spread throughout the park. Rangers established new protocols for visitor education about food waste. Parents used Max's example to teach their children about wildlife conservation. What began as a typical wildlife viewing had transformed into a profound moment of connection between humanity and nature. The bear survived, but something more important emerged that day at Redwood Valley. The reminder that compassion, knowledge, and courage know no age limits, and that sometimes the smallest hands can make the biggest difference. Want to see more incredible wildlife rescue stories that will touch your heart? Subscribe to our YouTube channel for daily videos showing extraordinary moments of human-animal connection. Press the notification bell so you never miss another emotional rescue that reminds us of our deep connection to the natural world. Join our community of animal lovers, making a difference one story at a time.